Story 1. The Watcher. This happened on March 17, 2019 in suburban Minneapolis, Minnesota. Rachel Thompson, a 24-year-old graphic designer, was house-sitting for her parents while they vacationed in Florida. She'd done this dozens of times before. The house was in a quiet neighborhood where everyone knew each other and nothing bad ever happened. Rachel's parents left on a Friday morning and everything started normally. She worked from home during the day, ordered takeout for dinner, and spent the evening watching Netflix in the living room. The house was a single-story ranch with large windows facing the backyard. Rachel loved those windows during the day. They let in so much natural light. But on this particular night, those windows became her worst nightmare. Around 10 p.m., Rachel was scrolling through her phone when she noticed something in her peripheral vision. Movement outside the living room window. She looked up but saw nothing except her own reflection in the dark glass. She told herself it was probably a deer or a neighbor's cat and went back to her phone. 5 minutes later, she saw it again. This time, she was sure. Someone was standing outside the window, just beyond the glow of the porch light. Her heart started racing. She stood up slowly, trying to see better without getting closer to the window. That's when she saw him clearly. A man, standing completely still, about 15 feet from the window, just staring at her. Rachel screamed and jumped back from the window, her phone clattering to the floor. She ran to the light switch and killed the living room lights, plunging the room into darkness. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold her phone as she dialed 911. The dispatcher told her to stay on the line and that officers were on their way. Rachel crouched behind the couch, her phone pressed to her ear, trying to control her breathing. The dispatcher kept asking questions, keeping her talking, keeping her focused. "Can you still see him?" Rachel peeked around the edge of the couch toward the window. The man was gone. Relief flooded through her for exactly 3 seconds. Then she heard it. Footsteps on the back deck. Slow, deliberate footsteps moving along the side of the house. He was walking around to the other side, toward the bedrooms. "He's moving," Rachel whispered into the phone. "He's going to the other side of the house." The dispatcher's voice remained calm, but firm. "Are all your doors and windows locked?" Rachel's blood ran cold. The sliding glass door in her parents' bedroom. Her mom always left it unlocked when she was home so their cat could come in and out. Rachel had completely forgotten to check it. "I don't know," Rachel said, her voice breaking. "I don't know if the bedroom door is locked." The footsteps stopped. For several long seconds, there was only silence. Then Rachel heard something that made her stomach drop. The sound of the sliding glass door opening. He was inside the house. "He's inside," Rachel said into the phone, her voice barely a whisper. "Oh my God, he's inside." "Where are you right now?" the dispatcher asked. "Living room, behind the couch." "Is there a way out? Can you get to the front door?" Rachel looked across the room. The front door was maybe 20 feet away, but to get to it, she'd have to cross the entire living room. She'd be completely exposed. And she didn't know where he was in the house. She heard movement from the hallway, footsteps on the hardwood floor, coming closer. Rachel made a decision. She couldn't stay where she was. She bolted for the front door, her bare feet slapping against the tile floor. Her hands fumbled with the deadbolt, her fingers refusing to work properly. Behind her, she heard the footsteps break into a run. The door finally opened and Rachel burst through it, running barefoot down the driveway. She didn't look back. She ran to the neighbor's house across the street and pounded on the door, screaming for help. The neighbors, an older couple named the Hendersons, opened the door immediately. They pulled Rachel inside and locked the door behind her. Through their front window, they could see Rachel's parents' house. The front door was still wide open, light spilling out onto the dark lawn. Police arrived 3 minutes later. 4 officers entered the house with guns drawn. They cleared every room, every closet, every possible hiding spot. The house was empty. Whoever had been inside was gone. But they found evidence he'd been there. Muddy footprints tracked from the sliding glass door in the bedroom, through the hallway, and into the living room. They stopped about 5 feet from where Rachel had been hiding behind the couch. He'd been standing there, watching her, deciding what to do. The next discovery was even worse. In Rachel's parents' bedroom on the dresser, the officers found something that made them call for backup, a Polaroid photo. It was a picture of Rachel, sitting on the couch, watching TV, taken from outside the living room window earlier that same night, before she'd noticed anyone was there. Written on the white border of the photo in neat handwriting were 3 words: "You look beautiful." The police never caught him. They found no fingerprints, no DNA, nothing to identify who he was. Security cameras from a neighbor's house showed a figure in dark clothing walking down the street around 11 p.m., but the footage was too grainy to make out any features. Rachel never stayed at that house again. Her parents changed all the locks and installed a security system, but Rachel couldn't shake the feeling that he was still out there, still watching. The worst part? 3 months later, Rachel's mom found another Polaroid photo tucked under the doormat of their front porch. It was a picture of their house, taken recently. Nothing was written on it, but the message was clear. I know where you live, and I'm still watching. Story 2. The Attic. This happened on June 8, 2021, in Portland, Oregon. Olivia Chen was a 27-year-old nurse who worked night shifts at a local hospital. She'd recently moved into a small 2-bedroom house that she was renting. The house was built in the 1960s, old but charming, with hardwood floors and high ceilings. And an attic. A cramped, unfinished attic accessed by a pull-down ladder in the hallway ceiling. Olivia had only been in the attic once when she first moved in to store some boxes. It was dusty and dark and full of spider webs, so she'd quickly stored her stuff and hadn't been back up there since. That was 3 months ago. Everything seemed normal until Olivia started noticing strange things. Small things at first. Food would go missing from her refrigerator. A whole container of leftovers she'd planned to eat for lunch would just be gone. She chalked it up to memory issues from working so many night shifts. Then her shampoo bottle, which had been half full, was suddenly empty after just 2 days. Her favorite mug would be in the dishwasher, even though she was certain she'd left it in the cupboard. Olivia started to think she was losing her mind. The lack of sleep from her night shifts was making her forgetful. That had to be it. But then came the sounds. Olivia started hearing noises at night. Not loud noises, but soft ones. Creaking sounds coming from above her bedroom, from the attic. Old houses make noise, she told herself. The wood expands and contracts with temperature changes. That's all it was. But the sounds were too rhythmic, too deliberate. They sounded like footsteps. One night, around 2 a.m., Olivia woke up to use the bathroom. As she walked down the hallway, she noticed something that made her stop dead in her tracks. The attic door in the ceiling was slightly ajar. Not much, maybe half an inch, but it was definitely open. She distinctly remembered closing it fully the last time she'd been up there. Her first thought was that the latch had failed, that it had simply dropped open on its own. But as she stood there staring at it, she noticed something else. Fresh dirt on the floor beneath the attic opening. Just a small amount, like someone had tracked it down from above. Olivia's skin prickled with fear. She should have left the house right then, should have called the police, but she convinced herself there had to be a logical explanation. Maybe a raccoon had gotten into the attic. Maybe that's what was making the noises and had somehow knocked the door open. She went back to bed, but she didn't sleep. Every small sound made her heart race. She kept her phone in her hand, finger hovering over the emergency call button. The next morning, exhausted and anxious, Olivia decided she needed to check the attic. She couldn't keep living with this fear. She needed to know what was up there. She pulled down the ladder and climbed up, flashlight in hand. The attic looked the same as she remembered. Dusty, cramped, filled with her storage boxes. Nothing seemed out of place. Then her flashlight beam caught something that shouldn't have been there. In the far corner of the attic, hidden behind some old insulation, was a sleeping bag, and next to it, a small pile of food wrappers. Empty water bottles, a bucket. Someone was living in her attic. Olivia's scream echoed through the small space. She scrambled back down the ladder so fast she nearly fell, then ran out of the house in her pajamas. She didn't even grab her phone. She just ran to her car and drove straight to the police station. 3 officers returned to the house with Olivia an hour later. They cleared the downstairs first, then carefully climbed into the attic. Olivia waited outside, watching from the safety of a police cruiser. The officers were up there for a long time. Too long. When they finally came back down, their faces were grim. "Ma'am," one of them said, "we need you to come with us. We need to ask you some questions." At the station, the officers showed Olivia photos they'd taken in the attic. The sleeping bag, the food, the bucket. But there was more. A collection of Olivia's personal items. Her missing mug. An old t-shirt she thought she'd lost in the move. A framed photo from her bedroom that she hadn't even realized was gone. And dozens of photographs. Photos of Olivia sleeping, eating breakfast, watching TV, getting dressed, all taken from angles that suggested they'd been shot from the attic door, looking down into her bedroom and living room. "How long has this person been up there?" Olivia asked, her voice shaking. The officer's expression was grave. "Based on the amount of trash and the condition of the items, we estimate at least a month, probably longer." Someone had been living in Olivia's attic the entire time she'd lived there, watching her, stealing from her, coming down at night while she slept. The police launched a full investigation. They dusted for fingerprints and found dozens of them throughout the attic and on the ladder. The prints matched a man named Derek Walsh, a 34-year-old with a criminal record for burglary and stalking. But here's the truly disturbing part. Derek Walsh had been the previous tenant of the house. He'd been evicted 6 months before Olivia moved in for failing to pay rent. rent. When he'd left, he apparently hadn't really left. He'd just moved into the attic. Police searched for Derek Walsh but couldn't find him. He disappeared completely after Olivia discovered his hiding spot. His car was found abandoned 3 days later in a parking lot 20 miles away. Olivia moved out immediately. She couldn't stay in that house knowing what had happened there, knowing that someone had been watching her, living above her for all those weeks. The case went cold. Weeks passed with no sign of Derek Walsh. Then a month after the incident, Olivia received a letter, no return address, postmarked from Seattle. Inside was a single handwritten note. "I miss watching you sleep." Police traced the postmark but found nothing. Derek Walsh seemed to have vanished. But sometimes, late at night, Olivia still wakes up with the feeling that she's being watched, and she can't help but wonder if he's somewhere close by, waiting for another chance. Story 3. The Repairman. This happened on October 23, 2020, in Austin, Texas. Emily Rodriguez was a 31-year-old accountant who worked from home most days. She lived in a nice apartment complex on the second floor, secure building, good neighborhood, never any problems. One Tuesday morning, Emily's refrigerator stopped working. The compressor was making a horrible grinding noise, and everything inside was starting to warm up. She called the apartment complex's maintenance line, and they said they'd send someone over that afternoon. At 2 p.m., there was a knock on her door. Emily checked the peephole and saw a man in a maintenance uniform holding a toolbox. He looked legitimate. Clean uniform, company logo, employee badge hanging from his belt. She opened the door. "Maintenance for the refrigerator?" the man said, giving her a friendly smile. "Yes, thank you so much for coming," Emily said, stepping aside to let him in. "It's in the kitchen." The man, who introduced himself as Mike, went straight to the refrigerator and started examining it. Emily went back to her home office to continue working, leaving her door open so she could hear if he needed anything. For the first 30 minutes, everything seemed normal. She could hear him working, tools clanking, occasional grunts of effort, exactly what you'd expect from someone fixing an appliance. Then she heard something that made her pause, the sound of a drawer opening, but not the kitchen drawer. It sounded like it came from her bedroom. Emily stood up and walked toward the bedroom. "Is everything okay?" she called out. Mike's voice came from the kitchen. "Yep, just about done here." Emily frowned. If he was in the kitchen, then who had opened her bedroom drawer? She walked into her bedroom and immediately noticed her dresser. The top drawer was slightly open. She always kept it closed. Inside that drawer was her jewelry box and some cash she kept for emergencies. Her hands were shaking as she opened the drawer fully. The cash was gone, about $200. Her jewelry box had been opened, and her grandmother's ring, the most expensive piece she owned, was missing. Emily's heart pounded as she backed out of the bedroom. Mike was still in the kitchen. She could hear him, but someone had been in her bedroom, and the only other person in the apartment was Mike. She grabbed her phone and quietly walked back to the kitchen doorway. Mike was crouched in front of the refrigerator, his back to her. His toolbox was open beside him, and Emily could see inside it. Sitting on top of his tools, barely hidden by a rag, was her grandmother's ring. Emily's throat went dry. She needed to get out of the apartment. Now. She started backing toward the front door, trying to stay quiet, but her foot caught on the edge of the rug and she stumbled, catching herself on the wall with a loud thump. Mike's head whipped around. For a moment, their eyes met. The friendly smile was gone. In its place was something cold, calculating. "You okay there?" Mike asked, standing up slowly. "I just remembered I have a meeting," Emily said, her voice cracking. "I need to step out for a minute." "But I'm not quite done here," Mike said, taking a step toward her. "Won't take much longer." Emily's hand found the doorknob behind her. "That's okay. You can finish up. I'll just be gone for a few minutes." Mike took another step forward. He was between her and her phone, which she'd left on the kitchen counter. The doorknob wouldn't turn. In her panic, she'd forgotten to unlock the deadbolt. "Actually," Mike said, his voice dropping lower, "I think we should talk about what you just saw." Emily fumbled with the deadbolt, her fingers refusing to work properly. Mike was walking toward her now, no longer pretending. She could see his true intentions written plainly on his face. The deadbolt finally clicked open. Emily yanked the door and stumbled out into the hallway, screaming for help at the top of her lungs. Doors started opening. Neighbors came out. Mike appeared in Emily's doorway, but seeing the witnesses, he turned and ran in the opposite direction, toward the stairwell at the far end of the hall. Two male neighbors chased after him while another called 911. Emily collapsed against the wall, sobbing with relief and terror. It was then when she learned something that made the whole experience even more horrifying. When police arrived and began their investigation, they discovered that Mike wasn't a real maintenance worker. The uniform he'd been wearing was stolen. The badge was a fake. He'd been impersonating maintenance workers at various apartment complexes around Austin for months, gaining access to apartments where women lived alone. And it got worse. Police found his van parked in the complex's lot. Inside, they discovered a collection of stolen items from at least 15 different apartments. Jewelry, electronics, cash. But they also found something more sinister. A notebook. Inside were detailed notes about the women he'd targeted, their schedules, when they were home alone. Personal details he'd learned by going through their belongings while pretending to do repairs. Emily's name was in that notebook, along with her schedule, her apartment number, and a note that said, "Lives alone, works from home, usually orders lunch delivery around noon." He hadn't just been there to rob her. He'd been planning something worse. If Emily hadn't discovered the stolen items when she did, if she hadn't gotten out of that apartment, the police said the outcome could have been much different. Mike, whose real name was Marcus Bentley, was arrested later that day trying to leave the city. He was charged with multiple counts of burglary, theft, and attempted kidnapping. During his interrogation, he confessed to targeting at least 20 women over the past year. Emily moved out of that apartment within a week. She couldn't stay there knowing he'd been inside, going through her things, making notes about her life. The violation she felt went beyond the stolen cash and jewelry. He'd stolen her sense of safety, but the story doesn't quite end there. 2 months after Marcus Bentley was arrested, Emily received a letter while she was staying with her parents. It was from the county jail, from Marcus. The letter was short, just a few sentences, but those sentences haunt Emily to this day. "I'm sorry about what happened. I never meant to scare you. I just wanted to get to know you better. Maybe when I get out, we can try again." Emily immediately turned the letter over to the police. It was added to the evidence against Marcus and used to demonstrate his dangerous obsession. His bail was revoked, and he's currently serving a 12-year sentence.